What a football weekend it was, Dougie. Welcome into the Colorado Prep Show presented by UPSWING. I'm the editor-in-chief of Colorado Prep's Dan Mormon. With me is the editor-in-chief of Mile High Sports Magazine, Doug Ottewell. Doug, you sent me a text. I think it was, I can't remember if it was Saturday night or sometime yesterday, where basically you said these rankings are going to be in chaos because you started kind of taking in the action of the weekend of high school football.
Yep, I started looking at scores and thinking about my job as a poll voter, and I was like, man, this is not going to be easy this week. There's all kinds of action, which I know we're going to jump into, but yeah, it made for a pretty exciting Friday and Saturday.
Yep, great weekend overall. Little disappointing in how things ended with the Denver Broncos, but hey, we move on. They're on to who do they have up next? Is it LA or I don't know? That's a tomorrow or Sunday problem, Dougie. But speaking of which, the brand new issue of Mile High Sports Magazine is available now. Complete, full, in-depth football coverage from the preps to the pros. Two outstanding covers in Bo Nix and Pat Surtain. The cover's definitely much more visually appealing than what we saw from the Broncos this weekend. The football players that featured in the issue that provided the most fun, by far the high school kids. I mean, when you look at Mountain Vista, they're continuing to roll. Cherry Creek looks dominant. Strasburg, Pueblo West, Broomfield, Fairview, Dakota Ridge, all big winners this week. And the one thing they have in common, all their kids can be found in the pages of Mile High Sports Magazine. So if you don't know where to pick one up, be sure to check out milehighsports.com/magazine. And Doug, as we start every week, it's just the two of us. We don't have a full-time guest this week because we're loaded with other guests. We've got a great football coach from a big win over the weekend. We've got our guy Bobby Reyes, who is going to talk some cross country. We've got some multiplier cleanup to do, and we're going to bring in Holy Families, Mitch Martinez, the assistant athletic director, who wanted to share his thoughts. But as we look first, Dougie, what's on your upswing?
Well, there were so many good games this weekend and so many that caught my eye, but the one that really sort of jumped out to me, and it kind of spawned from our conversation with Jermaine last week about the landscape in 4A football just being, kind of top heavy maybe, but it's hard to figure out who the best schools in 4A are right now in terms of those top 4 or 5 schools. And so Dakota Ridge just jumped off the page again this weekend. And it's hard for me to knock Broomfield or Montrose, those two teams from the state championship game last year, because they've held serve. They've done what they're supposed to this season also. But Dakota Ridge is hard not to notice. I mean, they shut out Mesa Ridge, which is another top 10 school, and just blasted them this week. That defense that they have is so good, and obviously they're playing a pretty proficient offense as well. And you mentioned the magazine as far as kids that we featured. Landon Carlsbeck, linebacker and running back for Dakota Ridge, is wreaking havoc out there. A great choice by you and Jermaine of a guy to feature. And he's kind of anchoring both sides of the ball there at Dakota Ridge. But I look at those top 3 teams, Broomfield, Montrose, and Dakota Ridge, and I can't wait to see one of them play the other one in the playoffs. So that classification is shaping up, and man, it's fun to watch those 3 teams.
Yeah, for me, and that game between Dakota Ridge and Mesa Ridge was Saturday night. I had that streaming while I was watching some college football. But I'll tell you what, the high school version of Red Zone's Witching Hour on Friday was just simply outstanding. You had from 10 to 11 p.m. Arvada West and Legend just putting on maybe a master class of what that classification maybe outside of Cherry Creek can be. And then where we're going to go to first after we bring in Jermaine. But I'll tell you what, I noticed that Pueblo East had a 21-0 win, or 21-0 lead over Pueblo South at the Cannon game. I'm going to screw all this up and make our guest unhappy, but game was delayed because of lightning. Things got going late at Dutch Clark. Turned out the Pueblo South offense got going a little late as well, but they scored 22 unanswered, including a walk-off touchdown and 2-point conversion to win the Cannon game. And it just, by the time we publish everything and shut down our computers at night, Kevin Schaefer was throwing me a text or two, and I just kind of sat there and trying to ponder, how did we get from point A to point B with some of these results? It was just so much fun to watch them unfold. So
I just thought you guys were slacking and not updating things.
Things were crazy. He lobbed he lobbed our soon to be guest a phone call to try and get him on his show, and turns out our guest was celebrating a big win. So we'll get to that here in just a second. But as always, we want to thank our friends at UPSWING and the UPSWING Foundation, located at 7460 South University Boulevard. Doug, I can't stress this every week, but you know how much they take into account recovery at UPSWING. I said before the show, I'm running in my first Pikes Peak Ascent on Saturday. This week is all about rest and recovery, and I had half a mind to do this show from the recovery area at UPSWING. They've got a great spa, sauna, everything, reclining chairs with Normatec compression boots. Having seen firsthand, I can tell you this is the place for young athletes to go when they're pushing their limits. It offers a safe and guided space to restore their strength and energy. It all sounds expensive though when you're talking about saunas and spas and Normatec boots, but UPSWING removes cost barriers to help young athletes gain access to world-class training and recovery. In fact, over 80% of the athletes that train at UPSWING are on scholarship. In addition to the recovery and the training, the training they get at UPSWING will prepare them for those big Friday night games that we've been talking about, the ones that had me laying awake at night saying, what the heck happened there? So at UPSWING, elite training is a way for youth to develop skills and habits that last for far beyond sports, and you can learn more at upswing.com. And with that, we bring in our guy from UPSWING, Jermaine Stafford. Once again, sitting in the command center at the Mile High Sports Studios at number 38. Jermaine, how was the weekend for you? Where were you at Legend Arvada West?
Yes, I was up top, as many were watching from above. It was a great weekend of football, very exciting. I went around and seen a lot of youth football as well. But
all right,
it was a Legend game. It was a very exciting game. Thanks for having me on.
You bet. And we're going to kick it off with some fun. First and foremost, I mentioned that Cannon game. I mentioned a thrilling come from behind victory, something we're looking to do a little bit more on this show. We're going to bring in a guy. I'm going to give him a large part of the responsibility of that. Pueblo South head coach Ryan Goddard joins us a little bit to talk about that thrilling atmosphere. Ryan, how are you feeling Monday morning post Friday night craziness?
Well, I wish I would have visited UPSWING on Saturday morning, I think, after that pitch you just threw out there, Dan. Could have used a little recovery, Saturday morning, because it was just an exciting game and, things were tense and, so you always use a little recovery.
So you saw me week one. You guys took on defending runner-up, state runner-up Meade and Jason Klatt and his boys, and that was I don't think that game went the way that you would have liked it. Meade looked really, really good, like they're poised to make another championship run. But what was your message after them? Because you bounced back with a good win against Falcon, and then you go into this high-level rivalry game, one of two down in Pueblo, that really just captures the attention of the whole state.
Yeah, I mean, certainly Meade was at Dutch Clark week one. I'm not sure if we were. But we had to bounce back. We had to do it quick. We were playing a 4A opponent the next week in Falcon and hadn't really, hit on high gear really offensively or defensively for that matter. But just one of those things that, it's about getting better, about the process of trying to improve each and every week. And then, we get to week three in a rivalry game and, our kids don't really need any extra motivation for that one. It was something that they were looking forward to. Especially coming off last year. Last year's Canada game, we took the lead with about 1 minute and 30 seconds left. We went for a 2-point conversion and took a 15-14 lead, and ended up losing that one 21-15. So, and when you're doing that in front of 10,000 people at Dutch Clark Stadium on a Friday night, like it's one of those things that kind of sticks with you. So our kids didn't need a whole lot of motivation to get ready for this one, but they really bought in over the last 2 weeks of practice and how you prepare. And so that was good to see. The other thing that was good to see was just their perseverance and, their relentless effort and trying to finish the game and not worry about the scoreboard, because we really needed that this week.
Ryan, you mentioned your week one game against Meade. When it comes to your experience with teams, you guys are a good football team. You didn't have your best game in week one, but you've kind of rebounded. From year to year, how much progression does a typical high school team make from week one to the playoffs? I mean, obviously you guys are ascending, and that's a good thing. Kind of get that loss out of the way in week 1.
Yeah, and I mean, it's, it changes, I think, with every team, because sometimes you bring back this, just huge experience, and for us, we got experienced skill guys coming back, but our offensive line, our defensive line guys, they didn't get as many reps, last year. So your growth really comes from just the experience in a week-to-week basis. Not that those kids didn't play, but they just didn't play a whole lot. So when you're facing kids, like the kids at Meade, and credit to, Meade in week 1 and Coach Cladd, like they were certainly prepared and ready to go. But, our kids they had to respond. I think from week 1 to week 2, you probably see a huge jump in the way your team competes and their growth. But then each every week after that, you want to see some growth. And you want to build on the things that you're doing well, and you really want to improve on the things that maybe you're not doing so well at that time. But, for us, we're always trying to get growth from week to week. Whether it be in, whatever phase of the game, but hopefully all of them, and just trying to get better. And at the end of the day, like, kids are getting better and they're having a great experience, and, you're pretty successful.
When you have that lightning delay and things, I don't think you guys kicked until after 8:00. You talked about the boys not needing any extra motivation, but is everyone just getting a little too antsy, maybe a little too amped up for a head coach's liking, who's trying to win back a Civil War era cannon?
That was interesting, because we got down to Dutch Clark about 5:15. And we did our pregame walk where we, get the kids on the field and walk, and then they started going in. As soon as they hit the locker room, we were under lightning delay, and that started about 5:25 and lasted about an hour and a half before we could get on the field. So we had a normal warm-up time because there were, Denver Broncos were down with their alumni and cheerleaders and miles, and all those things were so cool. But we couldn't, the schedule wouldn't really accommodate for making any changes or shortening the warm-up. So by 7:00, when we got out there, my kids, we usually go out in waves where we take our skill guys out and then we take our linemen out. And I was like, these guys have been in the locker room long enough. Like, we need to get out on the field, get them loose, get them in the environment, let them go. And then on the back end there, it was like, we had to clear the field at 20 minutes. We're not typically used to doing that, but I felt like, our kids were out, and we were probably like 28 minutes before kickoff. And I'm like, geez, we're just out here to be out here now. So, like, let's get back in the locker room. So then we had to wait a little bit longer, which was different. But, our kids responded. If we had gone any longer, I think I would have been buying pizzas for about 50 kids. And, trying to make some accommodations there, because, that was my concerns. Like, hey, we've been here for a long time. Our kids have got to be hungry by now. Are we going to have anything in the tank here to finish this game if we ever get this thing started?
And then you're down 21-0 going into the fourth quarter.
First correction, it was 21-7. So I appreciate the
extra.
Yeah, it was, we was 21-7 with 6 minutes to go. So it's kind of wild. We scored right at the beginning of the fourth quarter to make it 13-7. Then they responded. But yeah, 21-7 with 6 minutes to go. And it was just wildfire from then. I mean, we caused some turnovers, made it 21-13, probably 6 minutes to go. They snapped off a big run, got to 1st and goal at the 3. And the clock was ticking. We had one timeout left in that situation. And, they had a couple penalties, and 2 delay games and a false start on a field goal attempt. Went for it on 4th and goal, got down to the 6-yard line, maybe not actually the 4-yard line. So we had to go 96 and just over 2 minutes just to get an opportunity to tie the game, let alone win it.
And we've got some great video courtesy of Ruth Productions, your social media company that does so much great work. But this is the game-winning touchdown, or the game. I guess the game-winning touchdown, but your quarterback, Caden Herrera, is just a great competitor and a good battler. He finds Landon Cordova for the touchdown on great throw, kind of back corner of the end zone. And yeah. I mean, just one of those plays that is going to be remembered for a long time. And then how long did it take you to decide to go for this 2-point conversion where Herrera finds Naaman Robinson? How long was
Well,
how long did that decision?
Go ahead, Dan. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, how long did it take you to pull that trigger on that decision?
Well, first of all, on the touchdown catch, I'm not sure what was better, the throw or the catch, because both were incredible. But honestly, to answer your question about the 2-point conversion, there's a pass interference call that happened before, a little bit of a defensive hold. We were trying to go to Landon again. So we got, half the distance to the, half the distance there. And so we had a little break in action, but we called the play and I had Caden over there. I said, hey, after we score, we're going for 2. So it was before the touchdown the decision was made by me way longer, way previous to that. I knew as soon as we got going on the drive, we were going for 2, just because the momentum was going. We had momentum on our side. We had things, rolling pretty well on that drive, but I didn't want to stay there any longer than I had to, I guess. So we were going to go for 2 in that situation, no matter what. But yeah, I told Caden before the touchdown pass, I said, hey, after we score, we are going for 2. And that's something that we practice those 2-point plays every week. We practice those situations, as my defensive coordinator said, annoyingly. So that was good. But and I told our guys too, hey, when we need a 2-point conversion, this is the play we're going to. So they were all, all mentally prepared. They knew what we were going to run. I'd love to say they had a ton of confidence in it, but, I'm not sure if they did, but they played like they did. And that's what really mattered in that situation. So, but yeah, decision was made way before, and then they were told about the decision before we scored.
What's it like, that environment you win, whether you win a close game or a blowout, you're winning in front of all those people. What is it like to get that cannon painted? I mean, what's that mean to your school, your community, and you personally?
I think, well, I'm a Pueblo South guy, so I've been around the cannon game and South High School football for 23 years as a head coach, 3 as a player, but basically all of my life growing up in Pueblo. So, there's been some incredible runs in this game as far as, streaks. Lately, it's been a back and forth affair. So the cannon's been painted quite a bit over the last, 4 years. As I told our kids, I guess 2 years ago, hey, it's awesome to win the cannon, but it's really special to win it back. And we talked about that a little bit this week as well. And then, the cannon painting process is a process in itself. You're talking about a Civil War replica cannon where it's got to be taken apart piece by piece. The barrel weighs over 300 pounds. It is a really cool thing to see. But we're going to leave that one to the professionals this time. One time we brought it in and I think we just got spray paint. We had to get it covered because it was a necessity at that point. But now we try to lean on the professionals a little bit. So I leave all that up to people that make really important decisions, not just 2-point calls. So they're in the process of that. But yeah, I mean, it's cool to win it, but it's really cool to win it back.
Jermaine, I think we could throw down some tarp in the turf area and let the kids come up and get some recovery while they're watching the cannon get painted.
Absolutely. I would love to have that. And the coach, I love Pueblo area. I go back to running the community center at Seton Center and running the Head Start program over there for years. So I know that rivalry in that game. And going back to the days of the Pueblo Gators, right? When you talk about youth football, what does this type of win do for the youth football landscape there in Pueblo? Because I know you play for the Gators, you play for some of these teams that are coming up. You've been around there for a long time, and kids have to make a decision. Do they go west, south? Who do they play for, east? I know every high school program has a lot of integrity and pride. What does this type of win do for the youth programs in that area?
Well, I think that's a great question. I think it's so cool. And that's something that we've really tried to do lately, is just involve our community and, just even our middle school programs and try to, make sure that they have everything that they need. And if they ever need something, they can reach out. But I had somebody tell me I was actually at my kid's soccer game, and he was like, "Man, what a great game!" And he was like, "That's all anybody's talking about. That's all anybody's talking about this morning." So that was really cool. But I mean, I think it's cool. Like we did some elementary school walks this week, and we got to see, our Southside feeder schools, and all the kids in the hallways, and getting that support and them cheering us on. And then we had some kids go to a Southside middle school game this week just to watch their siblings and things like that. So hopefully those kids saw a great ending on Friday night, and then they were up ready to roll Saturday morning with great enthusiasm to go play for their teams and play this great game and play with as a great teammate, because that's really what it takes, and just being a great teammate and having fun, and hopefully that enthusiasm carries over, and those kids are looking up to our kids like, hey, this is what Friday nights are all about, and having a blast on Saturday mornings right now, but looking forward to playing on Friday nights.
Who was happier that it was also your 100th win as a coach? The players, or I know you're not going to say you. So what about your fellow administrators or even your wife?
We had because I was kind of told about that last week that we had 99 at Falcon, and I was like, and my defense coordinator was like, "Hey, did we tell them?" And I was like, "Absolutely not. Like, we don't tell the kids. Like, we don't need any more pressure. Now the pressure's on you because So, and he stepped up. He was like, "Yeah, I'm putting all my chips in this week. We got to get this thing done." Our kids were very excited. Our coaching staff was absolutely elated, because we're kind of a different place where basically I would say most of my staff, they were part of those wins as players. So they're kind of a unique situation. Like I've coached probably half of our staff when they were in high school, and so they've kind of grown up in the program. So they've been a part of those wins, as a player and then as assistant coaches. And I hope that they take immense pride in that, because it's really about what they've been able to accomplish. I've just kind of been the guy at the top, trying to keep everything organized and running, but those guys have put in all the work, and as well as our players. It's a great honor to be able to share those moments, because it's really about them. Like I'm actually sharing those victories with them versus the other way around. My wife was elated. She was excited. My kids were fired up. First thing when they came down the field, were like, "Hey, congratulations, 100 wins." To me, it's just a testament to what our kids and our coaches have been able to do and sustain for a long period of time. And now we're trying to go get the next one, and it's still the same process for me each and every week. That was not something I ever set out to do. Just wanted to win, wanted to compete at a high level, and wanted to raise our kids in the right way in our community, and give them the opportunity to grow up and be servant leaders in our community and make our community a better place. So,
well, I'll tell you what. Next year's version, I may drag Jermaine and Doug down. We'll go get a slopper before things get going at Dutch Clark, and we'll see if you guys can defend that cannon.
Yeah, that would be awesome. I'd love to see all of you. And like on that note too, I just wanted you guys to know I appreciate everything you guys do for high school sports, and the state of Colorado, and all the sports in Colorado from professional to high school. I think it's amazing and awesome, and I appreciate you.
We appreciate you, bud. Thanks, Ryan.
Hey, go ahead. You're good.
No, you're get back to teaching, I guess, is the last thing. You took some time, you had to get a sub, so might as well get back to your kids.
We're gonna go try and Colorado Prep Show. We like it.
Yeah, we're gonna go try and win the classroom right now. So
perfect. That's Pueblo South football coach Ryan Goddard. Ryan, we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, guys.
If we stick with that 3A, with that 3A class, we want to get into one other big win, because I mean, where did Timnath come from? That was the game that actually had us talking before the result of that Bell game, or that Cannon game. God, I did it again. Timnath gets a 24-0 win over defending 3A champion Thompson Valley. I mean, this wasn't a nail biter where it was going to be a coin flip at the end and you get that stunning up. Timnath came out and dominated them, and to score 0 points against a team that They were 1-1 coming into that game, and I haven't seen Timnath, so I have no true assessment of what they're about, but that was just a stunning result. Were you guys as surprised as I was seeing that one?
Well, I definitely was. I mean, as someone who's watching those polls all the time, to see a team that you really haven't, had any need to take a super close look at jumps out and not just wins a game, but pitches a shutout. And I think, that's what caught my attention. It's one thing if you have a 3-point game that goes either way or whatever, but Thompson Valley is a good team and specifically a pretty darn good offense. So to have somebody go out and keep them out of the end zone and keep them off the scoreboard altogether, that's pretty impressive. I mean, you got to tip your hat to Timnath, and now obviously we're going to be watching them pretty close in the polls.
Well, it's just like what Coach just spoke of. It's a great point, Doug. What Coach just spoke of not being present versus that first week versus Meade with his team. I mean, teams have that opportunity to show up, and then sometimes teams just don't show up. We still are dealing with, 15 to 18-year-old, student athletes, and some days it's just not going to be their day. But this program to come out to shut them out, that was very impressive.
Big shakeup. I mean, we've been talking about the top 4 of that 3A landscape in terms of Pomona, Windsor, Thompson Valley, and Meade. I don't know if we can officially say we're down to a top 3 in that classification, but there's definitely now 3 teams that are still undefeated that are going to carry the top end of that class, and that just makes it so much fun. And when you add in what some of these other teams are doing, Discovery Canyon, a notorious running team who always has that balancing effect. Holy Family looked so impressive in that win over Roosevelt, and Roosevelt is no slouch either. So this 3A classification, we've been saying it all year, a lot of parity, and it's gonna be a lot of fun. Speaking of fun, Jermaine, I mean, how was your Friday night over at the NAC with just the craziness that even just that fourth quarter turned out to be with Arvada West and Legend changing scores, and then for amidst all that, it was a missed extra point that ended up sinking Legend.
Yeah, it was an exciting night. Before we move forward on that 3A, I'm going to give up my poll vote. I spoke of Windsor a couple weeks back. I still believe Windsor is that team. I mean, look at not giving up
so good against Green Mountain.
Strong defense. I mean, watch out for that Windsor team. But yeah, that was an exciting game. Those are the type of games that you want to be at. Now, being a performance trainer for over 20 years, I tend to sit away from the crowd for reasons of I don't want to be seen on the right side or the left side of a stadium and cheering for the wrong individuals or not showing up to Cherry Creek homecoming game. So I tend to stay away and just kind of, we say soldiers move in silence, a lot of times when we go supporting our kids, but just that atmosphere to look at the Nat from above and watch both sides, the excitement. It was playoff football atmosphere. And I believe we will see, if we don't get this matchup, you will see this type of play from these two teams. They are playing at a very high level, very early. And it's unfortunate. I mean, the poor kid with the snap on that extra point for Legend. I mean, it's unfortunate it comes down to that, right? It was such a great game. I think we were looking at possibly going on to a 2-3 overtimes there, right? Because they were going back at it like a heavyweight fight. If you ask me, it was better than watching Crawford, dominate his fight. And you look at that fight that they had up there at the NAC. So, great excitement. Both teams executed. The line of scrimmage play was just on point. And for the first time, you see both coaches truly were slated to have to really coach, right? It wasn't a blowout. They were actually coaching in the fourth quarter. So very exciting game.
And it didn't really knock Legend down too much. I mean, as tight as those games are. So you now have, I would say, definitively a top 6 in terms of Cherry Creek, Valor, Arvada West, Mountain Vista, Ralston Valley, and maybe even that Fairview team. So outside of those 6, or even within those 6, who's really, Doug, in your mind, who's poised to make maybe a really good run in this postseason? Now that we're more than a quarter away through the regular season.
Well, I honestly think that any of those schools you just mentioned are very capable of making a run. And as Ryan said, high school teams, they go great distances from week 1 to the playoffs. I mean, there's a huge learning curve, especially for younger teams. But I also, I still think, and I've been saying it all along, Cherry Creek is so dominant. I think it's who gets the right to face Cherry Creek, and I don't want to put somebody in the championship game here this early in the season before we even got to October, but I feel like they've shown that they are the team we thought they are. To kind of use an old phrase, but I kind of still look back at that Arvada West and Fairview game and think, hey, this is a team that we can't count out. On Fairview, we talk about Legend and A West coming down to the wire, being a 1-point game. That was Fairview. That was a 1-point game also. That was one of those games where a couple of weeks ago we thought, okay, this could give us a little indication of who's for real, especially, was Arvada West for real? Clearly they are, but because Fairview lost by such a narrow margin, and they've got a young team, they've got a young quarterback, a junior quarterback that was good last year as a sophomore. So to think that just because they lost a game to Arvada West I believe it was week 2, they will be right there as well. I mean, that Fairview team will be one of the ones we're talking about, along with all the schools you just mentioned.
Yeah,
Jermaine,
sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to ask to follow up on that.
Yeah, as you can see, I'm biting at the mic, right? This is that time of the year where you get very excited. I know I do. We call this the BB King moment, right? It's like the thrill is gone, right? So the thrill is gone from the camp. The thrill is gone from playing high school football. We're 4 weeks in. We'll start to see who's sore, who wants to show up at upswing to get that recovery you're talking about. And you'll see these teams starting to look at the schedule and go, okay, how can we make it through the next quarter, right, of these teams? One team that really I think is going to be a common denominator to tell us where we go and move forward. If you look at the schedules, look at Pine Creek. And what I mean by Pine Creek is every one of those top 6 teams you speak of the next month, Pine Creek plays each one of them. And it's going to get interesting. Either they make it for themselves or they break it for someone else. But that Pine Creek team will face, that top tier of 5A football over the next 4 weeks. And it'll be interesting to see. I like Fairview as well. If you're talking about outside of that scope, looking from outside in, I like Fairview. I don't believe Legend will be startled from this. This actually gives them some learning space. They say it a lot of times, I was a Nick Saban guy. I played for Nick Saban there at Michigan State back. We were his first team in 94. And he talked about the praise, right? When we were going in to play Michigan, that 95 team where we upset Michigan. He's like, they can have the praise. We won't drink the poison. We're going to allow them to drink the poison. And at this point, that's where, we look and see Legend has the opportunity not to step up and drink the poison and continue to be praised for what they've done to this point. I still believe they're a strong team and they'll be there at the end. And obviously Valor sitting back, waiting, having their opportunity, but Pine Creek will have a chance to go stand toe-to-toe with each one of these teams, even Creek, right? They get Creek on that 25th of this month. So it will be interesting to see who comes out on top from that. All those teams going across Pine Creek, but it's going to be an exciting second part of the season.
Ralston Valley has a big matchup this week with Thunder Ridge. Grizzlies beat up Legacy pretty good. They're coming off a win over Arapahoe that had a lot of people being impressed. If this was a good statement win for Arvada West on Friday, does Ralston Valley, kind of in that Jeffco area, have a good chance to respond and really put a statement win in the books for themselves?
Absolutely. I mean, that's why it's starting to tighten up this time of year. They get those chances and they are playing against that same competition. I think they're a good one to mention kind of outside of that, top tier, because they can show us on relatively short order that they belong in that conversation too.
Yeah, I'll tell you, Coach Madden has that Thunder Ridge team rolling. So it will be interesting to see. That will be a nice battle. I was thoroughly surprised to see that Thunder Ridge team manhandle Arapahoe they did in the trenches. You don't see that from time and time out. let's go back and look at Thunder Rays for last year. Coach spoke about it from week 1 to the playoffs. How about from one season to the next with Coach Madden, what he's turned? I mean, that's somewhat, I don't call it a letdown game against, CT. CT is just a powerful team, right? They're still that Cherry Creek School District, I call it Cherry Creek School District type of team, where they'll show up and play with the best of them. But we're having a different conversation if Thunder Rays won that game and they're 3-0, right? Going into it, like, to turn that program around. They've had 2 big wins there from teams that we usually talk about with Arapahoe and Columbine. So, it's going to be a opportunity for Jeffco team to step up and get another big win.
Yeah, we've got some great games this week, especially in that 5A landscape. I mean, Ballard's going to take on Mullen. I actually think that's going to be a true test to see what this Mullen team is made of. We mentioned Ralston Valley and Thunder Ridge, and I believe that Pine Creek team that you were just talking about, Jermaine, I think they have Arapahoe. So I think that's another one that people should be keeping their eye on, just in terms of how that's going to shape the landscape of 5A. If we move down to 1A, kind of a little bit of a shakeup in some ways, where you have Ray, the defending state champion, who loses to Colby, an out of state team. Meanwhile, on Thursday night, Buena Vista went on the road to Centauri, which was a battle of top 5 teams. Buena Vista comes away with the win in that one, and kind of now looking at that top end of 1A, we have Lyman, who has looked dominant. I mean, Forge continues to look like Forge Christian, and then Buena Vista and Ray. But with Ray's loss, is Buena Vista kind of sliding into that either number 2 or number 3 slot, depending on where you guys have them ranked? I mean, Doug, you've seen a lot of Lyman type football, a lot of small school football. How impactful is that road win for Buena Vista at Centauri?
It's big, and to me, they do kind of slide into that number 2 slot. The tricky thing about evaluating Ray is that they lost to an out-of-state opponent that, quite frankly, I know nothing about. I mean, assuming they're a pretty good program, because there's not many reasons why a good program like Ray goes out of state for an opponent other than to play somebody that's really good. So, I don't want to discount a loss to an out-of-state juggernaut, too much. But at the same time, Buena Vista has looked like the real deal. And I think, Lyman off this last weekend, so that we don't really learn any more about them other than that they've looked good the entire season. But Lyman and Buena Vista play 2 weeks from this weekend. So that game should show us a lot about 1A and could potentially even be, a state championship preview.
Jermaine, from a coaching standpoint, because you've been on a lot of those sidelines, how much stock does a team put into a loss to an out-of-state opponent?
Not as much as we think, especially in state. That is a state line. I mean, I've stopped at Colby, heading my way to Kansas a couple of times. I think we all have to give gas there, right? That's one of those towns as well that's kind of have that energy and synergy of alignment of a 1A program. It's not a loss. It's a learning opportunity. You get to see some different things. For a coach, I'm sure going into that game, they had a game plan to try to gain some adjustments, right? Some adjustments from the week of before going into the next week. How can we against the Colorado teams, right? So if you have a Colorado team, I have a nice fly just likes to mess with me here in Restaurant 38. I think I'm not the first one to be involved with that. We're going to stay focused here, though. But, yeah, when you have an opportunity to work on something that other Colorado teams have not seen, I think out-of-state teams is when you do that. And I don't believe they take a lot of stock in a loss versus did we learn from it? And that is it's kind of a area war as well, right? That's like a Boulder team going out in Pine Creek. That's the distance between those two teams. So I'm sure they've played together on some playground before, and that was opportunity to kind of draw a line in the sand a little bit. But you don't take a lot of stock in that. You move on to next week.
I'll tell you what how much stock we do need to put into a loss is Idalia getting the better of Stratton and 6-man. I can't. You'd have to go back years to find a time when Stratton's loss to a non-Cheyenne Mountain Wells team occurred. So, does this open the door now? Or we've talked about how we're about a third of the way to that playoff, to the start of the playoffs. Do we have a wide open door now in the 6-man landscape, Doug?
Yeah, and just a quick point of clarification: they lost to Kalichi, correct?
Kalichi.
Yeah.
Sorry, Idalia moves into the number 1 spot in our rankings this week.
I knew what you meant, but I just wanted to make sure.
That's my mistake.
In case I had read the scores wrong, but does it open the door? Sure, but I'm really not sure what to make of that game. I mean, you look at a school like Kalichi. I mean, they blanked North Fork. I think it was 56-0 early in the season. And then they lose to an unranked Pete's team. And then they go in and they beat Stratton, who we all thought was kind of the class of that class. I think it's impressive. You can't take anything away from them, but I'm not so sure that they're not a Jekyll and Hyde kind of team. They're very inconsistent in terms of what they've done this season. Stratton, kind of to go back to what Jermaine said about a legend loss, this may be one of those kind of losses for Stratton. They may still be the better team, but they might have, come on to one of those Friday nights where not everybody's clicking. Maybe you get some sick kids and maybe you have an injury here or there. Who knows? But I would not count them out whatsoever. I think the school to look at in that class is Cheyenne Wells, who Stratton beat in week 0. And that was kind of at that time, it was sort of those two teams and which one was going to emerge as the front runner this season. So Stratton took a big leap right there. But ever since that loss, Cheyenne Wells has been rolling through their competition too. So, yeah, I mean, the door's wide open as we're starting to find out just across almost every class. But, you've got Stratton, you've got Kalichi, you've got Idalia, you've got Cheyenne Wells. Eads is another one.
Eads is scoring so many points every week.
Yeah, they're a juggernaut on offense, no doubt. So, some of those teams have a lot, almost what my math says, 4 out of the top 5 have a loss. So that's interesting because that's usually not typically the case in 6-man football. But it makes it all that much more exciting to watch as we get closer to the playoffs.
Jermaine, when you have a style of football like this, how much parity does this kind of inject into what we're going to see probably over the course of the next 6 weeks?
Yeah, I'd love to see the muscle capacity of each one of these young people, right? Because as we talk about all the time, performance, the hay's in the barn when it comes to speed, right? You start the seasons out, you're as fast as you're going to be for about 4 weeks. And then for the next 4 to 8 weeks, you have to go back and, have to re-up. Usain Bolt didn't train for the Olympics just for 4 weeks prior to that stretch, right, of that 9 seconds. So this type of football, you'll start to see it changes when coaches are just doing conditioning versus they're doing strength training and maintenance as well. And we do a lot of that now. This is one of the top weeks for us to start seeing kids come back in for recovery, speed maintenance, and it changes how the season goes. I mean, Cherry Creek is one of the reasons why they've been very successful. They have the same type of program every year when it comes to their off-season program, when their bye week hits. Go back and look at their bye week. Going out of state and coming home to take that week off after that homecoming, right? A homecoming game. You typically have like a week off and give 2 weeks for them is Creek versus Creek. And they get their players ready for that long stretch. So, yeah, it's interesting to see what kind of play you have and what kind of capacity you have for the athletes, their conditioning and their speed maintenance.
So many cool things happened. It was a great week of football, a couple of milestones. I mean, we talked to Ryan Goddard, who won his 100th win. Doherty coach Jeff Campbell, longtime coach in the state, gets his 125th win. And then Niwot guys got their first win since September 22nd of 2023. So you love seeing those kind of streaks end and, see just what that kind of energy can do for those kids. So as we look into the full-fledged schedule of week 4, are there any games that you guys are keeping an eye on this week? Because the one I'm excited for is going to be that Pomona and Dakota Ridge game, 2 Jeffco teams, both undefeated, both sitting in the top 3 of their classification rankings.
I'm going to move up north and go to Thompson Valley and Loveland. I know it might not have as much implication because it's 2 teams playing across 2 different classes, but it's still a neighborhood rivalry, and both teams are good. I'm also curious to see how Thompson Valley bounces back after what really can be described as a pretty stunning loss. So I think that game has a lot of implications, even though they're not competing against each other in the same class. And, it's a little bit like the Cannon game. Like, those kids want to win because they all know each other. They live across the street. Thompson Valley Loveland's one you don't want to miss.
And a lot of Loveland coaches on that Thompson Valley staff right now. So you get a little bit of, the Spider-Man meme of them pointing back at each other. So, Jermaine, where are you going to be texting me from on Friday night?
Well, I'm going over to check out that Mullen and Valor game. I
love it.
It takes us back, right? I mean, you think about the McCaffrey days and watching, Christian Cumber and Marcus McElroy, those Mullen and Valor games. Those are great games to be on. Each program is on I call the upswing. We call the upswing. Both of those programs are. With Mullen, this is a tough time for the coach, right? We're not putting them on a hot seat, but there's kind of a hot seat situation going on there at Mullen. With Valor, there's a new coach, right? And obviously he has a quarterback, not even controversy. He just has a quarterback combination.
Embarrassment of riches.
Right. It's a combination he has going on over there. So, yeah, I'm excited for that game. I'm excited to see the athletes of both sides, the skill guys that go at it, and see what can come of it. So that's where I'll be texting you from.
Awesome. But until then, what's going on at Upswing that's got you excited this week?
So, yes, once again, I'm very excited to promote our Cherry Creek softball program. Our coach and our lead outreach coordinator, and she's one of our lead trainers at Upswing, Coach Abby Marlowe. She's the head coach over at Cherry Creek High School, and her Cherry Creek program is just doing well. If you remember the story years back, they took a loss in regards to kind of the professionalism when it comes to the coaching staff over there. At that time, she took over, a very young coach, and she's been doing well to put her team in the rankings this year. And they obviously, you're at Cherry Creek, right? If you're at Cherry Creek, football's first. And to see that program stepping up, we have a lot of the young ladies on that softball program that train at Upswing. So it's more promotion of the student athletes versus just the school of Cherry Creek, but the student athletes within that program. We're very excited to see them play a big rival game this week. And we will come back next week, and I look to kind of have Abby step in a little bit, talk a little bit about that with some softball with you guys. But we're really excited to see them step up to the plate and have a huge challenge this week.
And we'll bring her on as we get closer to regionals and see how all that's shaping up. I want to say, don't quote me on this, but softball might be one of the elusive state championships that Cherry Creek doesn't have in their building. So I know that's a big focus for them. So, Jermaine.
Totally correct. Totally correct.
We love having you to talk football every week, man. I'm excited to hear about what goes on at Mullen and Valor. And, man, have a great week up there. If you see me pop in randomly, it's just because, like I said, I'm trying to get my legs in shape for what I got going on Saturday.
Stay away from those stairs.
Work him over, Jermaine, will you? Work him over.
He needs to come down and get some real workout in. Come see me, Dan.
I love it. Jermaine Stafford of Upswing, that's our guy. That's our football guy. We'll be happy to talk with him next week. Before we get into our cross-country talk, we want to remind you that Gordon Insurance is a great partner of the Colorado Prep Show, an independent agency that keeps the customer in mind. Gordon Insurance offers a wide variety of insurance products, including home, auto, business, workman's comp, farm, and ranch. That might help you out a little bit, Doug. They have offices throughout the Eastern Plains and can be found in Lyman, Sterling, Kit Carson, Calhoun, and Flagler. Tim Anderson is a dedicated professional who also moonlights as the play-by-play voice of the Lyman Badgers. So he had some time off this weekend. You can hear his call on the NFHS network each game day. And to learn more about how Tim and his team can help fulfill your insurance needs, check out GordonINS.com. We are going to switch over to the runners because in terms of cross-country meets that you see that have high impact through the course of the year, we saw a big one this weekend in the Liberty Bell. And to help break that down, we bring in Bobby Reyes, who's been a great contributor to ColoradoPreps.com since last spring in the track season. You can find all of Bobby's work right there. Check out his YouTube podcast, Spiked Up. We didn't have one this weekend, Bobby. You told me you were a little under the weather. Are you recovering?
I'm recovering. Actually, this is the best I've had a voice in the last 3 days. So I'm grateful to actually have a voice on Monday.
Well, yeah, I'm happy we could get you in. So, Liberty Bell, man. I mean, we talked about it a little bit last week. You're not seeing your Niwats. You're not seeing some of those top tier teams. So, how much of this can we really put stock in? I mean, Ben Adams had a terrific run running down a record, but what's your overall take of the overall value of what the Liberty Bell means at this point of the season?
I feel like Liberty Bell, you do get an accurate view only if you consider that Niwot and Coronado were not there, for looking at girls and guys sides. But beyond that, just about every major player in Colorado was there for most of the classifications, or mostly 4A, 5A. But so Ben Adams with that 1432 is, I mean, he's just statement after statement every week. And, obviously he's eyeballing a state title, but the performance, and the guys that he beat are revealing. At that, even if Nawat was not there or Coronado was not there, I still feel like it does say something.
When you look at the results at Liberty Bell, are you starting to get a sense of what your expectations might be for how the state meet's going to play out? I think it's November 1st at North Penrose Event Center.
Definitely. I feel like, again, with you mentioned this, like Niwot was not there, which is always a bit of an asterisk with Liberty Bell because they are always a major player at the state meet, but you can at least see where everyone else stacks up. And, seeing Ben Adams, again, with that 1432 right there, that's a 5A front runner. But then, looking right behind it, Jay McDonald from Summit ran a 1439. The 4A landscape, again, we're not seeing Coronado with Oliver Horton or Aiden LaRue, but right there, that just makes that 4A race look even better. And again, we're only talking about the guys so far. There's still a lot to talk about on the girls, but it does hint at what we're going to see in November at Penrose. As long as at least in my mind, what I do is I leave a little bit of a space because I'm like, okay, we're going to see Niwot, we're going to see Coronado when the time comes. But here's what everything else looks like, and it's starting to shake out.
Bobby, we've often heard a lot about Heritage Emery Schwamm. Talk a little bit about her. Is she the real deal? Where do you kind of slot her in some of these same kind of conversations as far as we get closer to state?
Yes, definitely. Emery is having an incredible year so far. And, she ran really well last year. She ran great on the track. But I feel like this year, it's not just how fast she's running. I kind of said this last week on my podcast, but I was like, it's not how she's running. It's who she's beating. And week after week, she's adding a new runner to the list of people she's beat. This past weekend, Eaton's Delaney Reuter, who is the number one runner in 3A. I knew this was going to be an incredible battle, and it turned out to be, a race that went down to the wire. Literally, I think it was 2/10 of a second that separated these two. But Emery Schwamm, this is her home course, obviously, but her kick, I don't know if you guys saw, there was a live stream of the meet, and Emery was a solid 20 meters behind Delaney with maybe about 400 meters to go, and she just rolled her down, kicks her up, and kicks her down and wins at the line. The fact that she's still finding ways to win, whether that's from the front or from kicking, to me says, yes, this is someone who is the real deal. She runs for Heritage, so she's in 5A. She will have to compete with Nike Cross national champion from 2 years ago, Addie Ritzenheim. Those two have not raced each other this season, and they probably won't race each other until state. So we could have a huge showdown coming here in a couple months.
Bobby, it's interesting to hear you kind of break down the individual matchups, so to speak. And you mentioned times, but you keep referring to it's who they beat. Mm-hmm. How much ground can be made up, say, from now to state for say that kid that maybe loses by a few seconds or even a few tenths of a second? What goes into preparing somebody for state and the idea that they can leapfrog somebody that they lost to by a small margin?
Mm-hmm. I feel like there's still a lot of time. It's September. It's the middle of September. We still have maybe 6 weeks or so until the state meet, and we haven't really seen a full strength Niwot squad. A lot of these teams, especially in Colorado, they want to win state. Teams like Niwot want to win state. Guys from Coronado want to win state. Everybody wants to win state, but these teams are some of the best in the country, and so some of them don't really show their cards until maybe the state meet itself because they're looking at Nike Cross Nationals, which is in early December. They still have to qualify for that in late November. So these performances that we're seeing, that they're saying one of two things: either A, someone's in really good shape really, really early, or they're going to get even better. And so when it's with Colorado cross country, with the altitude, and then again with these teams being some of the best in the country, you kind of have to look at everything and to add more context. You have to dive into it. And so what I do is I like to talk to some of these athletes and be like, see how their training is going, see where they're going. As an example, a guy like Oliver Horton, who ran a 14:47 about a week ago, is still in the early stages of his training, which is kind of frightening. We did not see him at Liberty Bell, but we'll see him in the coming weeks and months. And so I really feel like there a lot of ground can be made up right, in the coming weeks. It's what we see now is great, but there's a lot more to come.
How much faster can Oliver get if he decides to wear a watch? I mean, that's the question, right?
I saw that show and I kind of laughed because I'm a guy who doesn't wear a watch either. And I feel like in some coaches, I had a coach once who would not allow me to wear a watch because he felt like it was holding me back. Because sometimes you're thinking, okay, like in my mind, 100% is, a 440 mile pace or something like that. But how much faster could I run if I wasn't limiting myself by not wearing a watch? And I kind of felt when I talked to Oliver after he raced, I kind of got that vibe from him that maybe the watch might hold him back. And so not wearing the watch, he's just focusing on the feel and not, continually looking down to see where he's going. I mean, it could go either way. Some athletes are pushed by the watch and some are held back by it. It kind of depends on figuring out, what's best for you.
You mentioned, or we talked a little bit about Ben Adams and his run on Saturday. The one thing I want to say is he was just a few seconds off of matching that course record from Parker Wolf, the Cherry Creek great, who's gone on to do so many good things at the University of North Carolina. Does that put a little bit of fuel in Ben's tank for what he wants to accomplish at state?
I would imagine that he is not only eyeballing a state meet record, but yeah, I mean, if I were him, that would be super exciting to know that, hey, I ran a 14:32 in the middle of September, and knowing how close he was to what Parker Wolf ran. Obviously, every distance athlete knows how good Parker Wolf is and what he's gone on to do. In my mind, that's motivating. He's got to know if he's run a 14:32, even though it's this early. He does run for Mountain Vista, which is a great program, always has been. I would imagine that that's definitely motivational looking at the state meet in terms of how much faster he can run.
Bobby, what's on tap for you this weekend?
This weekend, I feel like the big meet is St. Vrain. They break up the division, so you have a small school and a large school division. So the good thing with that is you can actually start to see some of these smaller school athletes shine a little bit more and get a better idea of what we're going to see at the state meet. But St. Vrain is it's a very tough course. It's actually one of my favorite courses. But it year in and year out, it is always a great meet, and that's normally where we see Niwot actually maybe run an honest effort for the first time of the season. So we might have more answers to some of these questions that we've been asking. So
awesome. And you can catch all that coverage on coloradopreps.com over the weekend. Bobby, I don't know if I'll post right away on Saturday. My legs may be tired. I may be tired, but as always, man, we appreciate the work that you do, and especially on top of the written work you do, your podcast Spiked Up. It just gives a great spotlight to the high school runners, and we're so happy to have you on board.
Cool. Thank you so much.
You bet. Bobby Reyes, you can find all of his work at coloradopreps.com. Did so much great work with Mile Split for years. That's how Bobby and I got to know each other. He's been a great addition for what we do. Dougie, we're on top of, getting closer to cross country postseason. I mean, regionals are going to be obviously a little sooner than state, but CHASSA is starting to release every week. They give us an updated top 10, but it's all selection and seeding index based. Last week, I think we talked about it in terms of, I think it might've been softball that they had the numbers up, but we're starting to get a lot more of, I think all the team sports except for football. So, is this, now that you're kind of in this regular mode, is this going to be a fun thing to track just to see how teams are kind of shaping up when it comes to playoff seeding and everything?
Yeah, I think so. But it kind of goes back to the conversation that we had a week ago. I don't know that a whole lot of stock can be put into it right now. I mean, there not only is there weeks where these can change quite a bit, but I also think, with any kind of index, whether you're talking, college football voting or high school sports, there's a big difference between a number on paper and a team that takes the field or court or whatever it might be. So I am starting to watch. I think there's some some things that were predictable so far, but then there's also some surprises. So, across all the sports, I think that's going to be the case. And I think we'll start really talking about these indexes, and particularly when it comes to football, because I know we're very involved in those polls. We'll be curious to see how the index compares to our polls. So I think that's something that will definitely be on my radar here pretty soon.
Yeah, and just to give you a quick example, and I'm not discounting anything, it's just looking at a ranking and seeing what's going on. But in 5A, your number one team so far is Grand Junction, sitting at 6-0. I know they've had a couple of really big wins early in the season, but you also have teams like Legacy, Northfield, who we're starting to see in a lot of great sports, or compete in a high level in a lot of sports. And then your defending champion Cherry Creek, who's still undefeated. They're sitting in number 4. So it's a good sample, but we need to see how these things start playing out. It's just fun. It's fun for us to talk about. And I know when those football indexes come up and we can start kind of pinpointing who's going to play who in the playoffs, that should make for a fun deal. So anyone missed it, on coloradopreps.com last week, we had a comprehensive story up, a lot of Big J journalism work, Dougie, in regard to the classification multiplier that we're going to see coming down the stretch with a CHASSA vote. In fact, that vote takes place tomorrow, and we'll get into a little bit more of that. We have Mitch Martinez, who is the assistant athletic director at Holy Family. He's going to join us coming up next.
Look closely, and you'll see adventure, discovery, even a little mud. These 4x4s provide the muscle, tech, and durability needed to go anywhere. The Ford Bronco and Bronco Sport. It's time to see Ford in a new light. Be winter ready with 0 down leases on a 4-wheel drive Bronco for just $439, or a Bronco Sport for just $369.
For those who need a dissertation on what's happening at the CHASSA Legislative Council tomorrow, you can find my story at coloradopreps.com. Right now we have assistant athletic director at Holy Family, Mitch Martinez, joining us. Mitch, Ben Peterson had texted me last week and told me you had some great insight that probably from both sides of the argument. So I know there's a much more in-depth issue that you're looking at there, but welcome to the show, and give us a little bit of your background if you can. Wow, Mitch might be on mute, so we'll work on that here in just one second. Doug, while we're waiting on that difficulty, you had time to read through the story, and mainly because I told you needed to, just to correct some things. But how much of that information was new to you, or did you have a guess about?
I think first of all, what I would say is that it was a very fair and balanced article, and I'm not trying to say that to pump your ego up, but I think for anybody that wants to go read that article, which is still up on coloradopreps.com, it's important to read, because it's never as simple as, hey, private schools have an advantage, and this is why this makes sense. By the same token, there are some advantages that are pointed out that may be able to, be sort of leveled out when you look at a potential change like this one. So I do think that there's a lot of new information, regardless of what side you're on. And I don't think this is an issue that people should necessarily take a side, but I do think it's worth a read. I think it's worth kind of considering the position and the perspective of each side of that equation. What does that mean for a public school that's maybe in the class 2A or 3A? What does it mean for a school that's not that big when you look at population? Take Valor Christian, for example. A lot of people don't like Valor Christian. Why? Because they win. But a lot of people don't realize that they're playing with a a much smaller, total population in the school than a true 5A school does. So you have a lot of great information in that article. I think I would encourage anybody, whether you're just interested in the topic or whether you're actually, in the high school sports scene. It's definitely worth checking out, and you can kind of see, where both sides are coming from on this big vote that's coming up.
And a couple of the things that I actually I probably had an idea on, but I got a lot of clarification when talking to people, because I talked to Ben Peterson, who I've mentioned. I talked to Rochelle Robbins, the athletic director at Lutheran, Dylan Johnson, her assistant athletic director, and then I talked to Sarah Crawford out at Kit Carson, who, Doug, you and I know very well. She was the Dave Sanders Award winner for Mile High Sports Magazine and the Preps issue. Neil Devlin did a fantastic write-up on Sarah, but Sarah gave me a lot of background in terms of this was not a CHASSA office centered discussion. This was the schools going to the members of the clock committee and the board of directors that represented them and saying, hey, they were looking at classification issues that were not involved with the public versus private discussion, but the schools were the ones that wanted to bring that conversation in. So we can obviously get more into that later. It looks like we've got Mitch back with us right now. So Mitch, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
There he is.
Right.
There we go.
Hey, thanks for joining the show.
People are tired of hearing Dan and I talk.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but see what I have to say. They might get tired of me real quick.
Well, no, we're very curious to hear your perspective. Ben told me that you had spent over 30 years in Adams City at Adams City High School in is that Adams City School District as well, I would imagine?
Yeah, it's Adams County School District 14. And I was there for 29 and a half years. So yeah, had a little bit of time there, grew up there, and kind of have a different perspective on this whole issue that we have going right now.
So what, how has your point of view evolved from spending so much time in a public school district and then finding your way into the position that you're in at Holy Family?
Okay, so what I've seen is I've been blessed to be actually on both sides of this spectrum. I've been here, I've coached softball here, and we've had a pretty successful program, and we put a lot of time into it. Then on the other hand, I coached softball and girls basketball at Adams City High School in the early 90s and into the late 90s and into the 2000s. And so my perspective of what I'm seeing is the fact that the multiplier that they're looking at is going to affect a few schools, but I'm wondering how's that going to affect the schools like the Adams Cities, and I'm going to throw some names out just because. And we look at Aurora Centrals, we look at Gateways, we look at these schools that are really struggling and it's not even about winning. It's about getting kids on the fields, on the courts, on the track. If you look at the core values of CHASSA, all 8 of our core values start with participation. And I don't know if a multiplier for a specific small amount of schools is going to affect our population of kids who need to be on the field, the schools that need to be getting those kids not necessarily on the fields per se, but in the classroom, which is where it's most important, where we can get the education done that they need to have in their lives to move forward.
With that, do you feel like the multiplier might hinder that participation from schools like Adams City, or is this an issue that you think the energy is better spent addressing that particular front of what we're trying to do?
Yeah, I think the multiplier is not going to affect those kids, and I don't know if what the purpose of the multiplier is it to help our kids in some of these other places have more participation, or is it just because somebody's being successful, whatever classification it is, private or public? Is it going to affect the kids that we need to affect? Is it going to affect enough kids? And I don't know if the multiplier really does that. I think it looks at one particular issue, but what about those other kids? What about this? Get those kids some success and get them participating. And I don't know if the multiplier, moving a few people here around there, is going to do that.
Mitchell, would there be another means? And we've talked about it on this show, and I believe that there is a movement or has been a movement to come up with some kind of a, maybe a relegation system or a promotion system where let's take a school like Adams City, which, at various times has had a pretty decent population, a pretty decent enrollment, but maybe hadn't been as competitive. Would your participation in sports, which you said is a core value, and I completely agree and understand where you're coming from, would your participation go up if a school like that hasn't maybe competed as well in the classification they're in could move down and have some more success in some of their programs?
Yeah, and the thing is that that's a great question. I don't know if it's, you see schools that get moved down in a classification and they're still struggling. And I don't know. I was talking to somebody the other day. It's almost like you look at the college situation with the FBS and FCS. You have two. They're both Division I football, but they're completely different in the way they do their playoffs. They have their own tournament, and you have one champion FBS and you have one champion FCS. And I don't know if looking at something like that for our high schools would be something better than just moving them a classification, because I've seen schools, and I'll throw another school up. My friend was a principal at Jefferson High School for multiple years, and he talked about getting kids in the seats to be successful, and that way they could be successful on the fields. Well, they moved down to, I believe, 1A in football, and they're still struggling. So how do we, I know those things are there, but how do we make it maybe some type of system like an FBS, FCS for our schools? And then once you start feeling success, you're going to start getting more kids there. And once we get more kids there, obviously they're going to be in the classroom, which is really what we're looking at.
Well, and conversely, and if you put on your Holy Family hat, I know Holy Family has been good in a lot of programs, football, softball, various things that they've had a great deal of success for. Should we be punishing a school because they are good and moving them up into a classification? Would that essentially deter participation if a school that's used to being good, highly competitive, all of a sudden gets bumped up and gets brought down to earth by a much bigger school and a much bigger class? Does that have an adverse effect?
Right now we're in a league that is a 4A, 5A league in softball, basketball, volleyball, and we compete. And I think the way that the Holy Family is built, the way the culture is, from what from me coming in here, we're going to continue to compete. It doesn't mean necessarily we're going to win state championships every year, which is really not what it's about. It's about teaching our kids to become good young adults, to learn how to compete and how to be successful once they leave this school. So for me, we're going to be a school that competes, just because of the way the culture is and the way we're set up. And I think that's the thing with the way they're trying to do this. It doesn't really affect us if we get moved up. We're going to compete, but how do we take care of those other kids? And that's what my main concern has been and will always be. How do we take care of those kids that need to be feel that success? And I've done that again at Adams City High School with our girls basketball program, and I could go on and on about that and how we did that. But I think that's the things we need to look at too. Is what is best for our association and for our high schools here in Colorado.
So when I was getting my background for this story, what I was able to piece together was that CHASSA they figured out that they had to change the system in which schools were classified, or at least the way that they got the enrollment number by which the schools were classified. They were using a number that was out of date. It was one number, it was self-reported, and they had to get a more accurate representation. So they took those steps, and that's now a system that's in place. They took another step with the dominant program bylaw, that now you're moving up if you win 3 out of 4 titles and getting to a semifinal. A lot of people are seeing this as a next step of, okay, we're trying to level the playing field a little bit for schools that have this perceived advantage of, if we just want to call it money, if you're paying tuition, odds are you have the resources to to play a lot of club ball, to travel, to see a lot of external competition. That's probably the perceived advantage. Are we taking the steps necessary? And even if this isn't the one that you're hoping for today, does it look like we're trending in a way where eventually we can get to a system where those kids are being addressed?
I think I hope so. I hope that, like I said, since the early 90s, I've talked about this with people, and it doesn't seem that that's this. I think we're taking steps, but I don't know if it's the proper steps. I remember back in the early 90s in education, the key term was how do we change the paradigm? How do we look at where we're at and where we're headed? And I think, I think it's time that we do that, because changing a few schools around is not necessarily the step yet. I know we're trying to, and I know there's people that are out there talking about it, and that's good, and I'm thankful for that. But I also think that there needs to be a bigger push for how do we help those other schools, and what do we do? And I'd be willing to do whatever, because I've been there, I've done that, I've grown up in that environment, in that culture, and I'll do whatever it takes, because I feel like that's where we should be headed. And instead of this other way, I think that's the place we should be looking.
If someone were to ask what you would like to do, what parameters or what steps would need to be taken, do you have an idea of where you would start in terms of leveling that playing field? I have my own thoughts. I just want to.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I think, again, like I said, I've been there a long time, and I don't know if, like I said, I gave the example of FBS.
Right.
When I was at Adams City, I talked about, I don't know if you guys know Fred Applewhite is. He was a long time
I do
AD at DPS and then at Adams City. And him and I used to talk a lot about the fact that how do we make maybe even a different division? Because we have certain leagues, like right now, where a team will come through and be very successful, and they hit the playoffs, and they haven't hit, they're not ready for that particular level. And we used to talk about, like an A and a B. And I don't know if that's what you want to use the term, but different divisions so that we can take care of those particular numbers, get a team to be successful, to feel that ability to be able to compete. And then if they start becoming successful, then maybe we had talked about, you talked about the being success and moving up, then they're going to be ready for that. And I think that's real important that we start looking at it differently than just the classifications the way they are, maybe breaking up the classifications so that those teams can be successful.
And my thought, I'm not going to ask you to do something that I'm not willing to divulge, but if you were going to keep your current classification system in process, and I don't know if this would work. I talk a lot with Ryan Casey, and I think Ryan is one of the smartest guys I've ever worked for in my life. But I would love to see almost a three-sided approach of enrollment maybe as your foundation of where you would classify schools. But I also think participation numbers within your sports is a massive figure that needs to be taken into account. And then I also think everyone wants to make the choice state argument that Colorado is. Can we look at an out of district, out of boundary figure for that? And I don't know how we would affect, say, these private and charter schools where that out of boundary number would be 100%. Maybe that's the advantage that this multiplier is supposed to be. Maybe that's the figure that compensates for that. But is when you hear something like that, or do we just need to see something along those lines, more than the approach of just the enrollment number, and really start looking into what's going on specifically within these buildings?
Yeah, because I know, again, when I was at Adams City, for the most part, and I'm not saying all cases, but in many cases, many of our best athletes would grow up there and then go to another high school. And that's the problem with, I think that's the problem with the multiplier, is that we have an open enrollment system right now within our high schools. So I don't know if the multiplier really addresses the fact of open enrollment, since anybody can move to wherever they need to be. So I think that's something that needs to be looked at, is the fact that, is this going to address the issue? And then how do we move forward for leveling the field, like you were saying, for all these other schools in some way?
I think regardless of where we go next, this vote's coming down tomorrow. So it'll be interesting to see. And I think regardless of which way it goes, I'm interested to see what steps are being taken after, just to keep this classification conversation moving forward. Because eventually, and we see it with so many kinds of government, whether it's high school athletics or local, state government, it's a process that always takes a little bit of time to get through. So, Doug, anything else you need to ask?
No, I think I don't necessarily have any more questions, but Mitchell, you've really examined this on both sides of the equation, and I would say I appreciate that from a standpoint of somebody who's trying to come up with the right thing and the right thing for kids. What's kind of your advice maybe to people on both sides of this, whether it's before the vote or once the vote happens, because you're going to have half the people who are disappointed in the way it goes.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing is that we just need to continue to. I know people are going to be upset either way, and that's just how it is. But when we're working with kids, let's try to find what's going to be best for all kids. And right now, I think we're looking at a small percentage of the kids, of the teams and schools and kids that are in upper areas, and I should say echelons in terms of playing. And I think we need to start looking at those teams and those schools and how do we get them involved? How do we make them feel successful? And how do we make them so they're more competitive and that we can, in the long run, ensure education, ensure them being successful in our society? I think that's the thing.
And I'll stress, because I know Ben stressed this to me when we talked previously, but dialogue is very key in this process.
Without a doubt, we need to talk to one another. Not only do we need to talk to one another, but more importantly, we need to listen to one another. And I think that's going to be the key for us moving forward.
Mitchell Martinez, softball coach, assistant athletic director at Holy Family. Thank you so much for your time. And
thank you.
We'll see how this vote goes tomorrow.
Okay, greatly appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
You
Mitchell.
bet.
All right.
Fully loaded show, Doug. So
lots
lot of information.
I think Mitchell gave us some great perspective, and he obviously comes into this discussion with a very level head, very willing to look at both sides. So really appreciate him coming on, the great guest to give a really, really good perspective on this whole concept.
And I want to stress that everyone that I've talked to in this process has been very level-headed about the entire approach. And depending on which point of view you have, this has either been a conversation that's been going on for 30 years or was rushed through. And I definitely understand both sides. So we'll see. I will have full results, full information on tomorrow's legislative council vote up on Colorado Preps in the morning. But I think it's about time we send her off, Doug. We've got a few standouts, letter winners that we want to highlight as we do each week. So the first one, props to Liberty Athletic Director Jeff Giovanone, who shot me a text over the weekend letting me know that Clay Shelter, one of their outstanding defenders, was Liberty's first win of the season. They beat Denver East. This is a kid who had 10 tackles, 2 pick sixes. He forced a fumble and recovered a fumble, was just a ball hawk everywhere. Lancers get their first win of the year. Great day for Clay Shelter.
Well, I barely got off my couch on Saturday, so good job, Clay, for doing all of that. I am going to head to soccer once again, and I choose these from our list and keep them coming. ADs and coaches, keep these standout, shout out letter winners coming our way. But I'm going to go to Battle Mountain. Jacob Methin, he scores a hat trick in 3 out of 5 games this season. As a former soccer player, one who barely scored at all, I find that amazing. That I don't care what level of competition you're playing. I don't care what position you're playing. Scoring a hat trick in 3 out of 5 games, that is just flat out getting it done. Better yet, his team is 4-1 on the year. So keep up the good work, Jacob.
And Battle Mountain is always one of those teams that's going to find their way in state championship contention towards the end of the year. So that'll be fun to watch. I'm actually sticking on the Western Slope for the last one. I'm looking at Montrose girls volleyball with Maggie Legg. She's totaled 111 kills so far this season, averaging 5 kills a set. Most importantly, the Red Hawks are undefeated, and that includes a victory at the Lewis Palmer tournament about just over a week ago. You had teams like Lewis Palmer, Pueblo West, Durango, Platte Valley. I mean, you're talking about a who's who of dominant volleyball programs that were up at Lewis Palmer, and it was Montrose getting the win. They remain undefeated on this year. I think they were number 1 in the girls volleyball selection and seeding index when I looked at one point last week. So we'll see what this Montrose team is made of. I know they want to get back to the Denver Coliseum, and I know they want to be playing late in the day on Saturday. So that's going to do it for us. Big thanks to, of course, Jermaine Stafford, our guy at Upswing, Ryan Goddard, the football coach at Pueblo South, Bobby Reyes, and Mitchell Martinez. Great stuff from all panelists involved today. Dougie, you published a great column on milehighsports.com this morning, looking more at the professional football landscape. I encourage everyone to go read about that. But if you were going to look at what's going on with your week, whether it's high school or the pros, or even maybe some college stuff with Coach Prime and his guys, what's on your agenda?
Yeah, there's a lot to think about. I mean, football season is what everybody around these parts live for, regardless of what level you kind of follow. But, both Broncos and Buffs kind of coming off those disappointing losses where you kind of look at them and you say, okay, well, is CU's is sort of in a transition year? Do they just not quite have it, or do they bounce back? And, you can't ever bet against Coach Prime. But I think that's an interesting one to keep an eye on. The Broncos, I feel like that was I'd stop short of saying choke job, but they just let one slip. So how they bounce back, I think, is key. And we'll have some great Broncos stuff up on milehighsports.com. And then, we talked about it earlier in the show. There's a handful of really good high school games coming up this next week. So I encourage everybody to get out there Friday night, get an early dinner, go catch a game, be in bed early. Then you got whole weekend of college and pro.
And one thing I meant to tell you, I mean, even we're in different locations, we're both remote, but you smell like a ranch, and I'm sure there's a good story behind it somewhere, something that we might even be paying attention to from the sports landscape. So you'll have to tell us about that some other time, though. We're done. For our executive producer, Danny Bailey, always appreciate you, buddy. Great job with everything. Stay tuned next week. We've got more football. We'll have volleyball, softball, cross country, whatever you can think of. We'll have it covered right here on the Colorado Prep Show, presented by Upswing.